Get now to our panel for more on what is at stake. Gary Locke is former U.S. ambassador to China. Michelle Cruz-Cabrera is CEO of MCC Global Enterprises, CNBC contributor, and is currently in Caracas, Venezuela. We'll get to that in a moment. But Gary Locke, ambassador, I want to start with you. What would be the one or two best things, most important things that President Trump can accomplish in Beijing?
Well, President Trump is really there for optics. He'll want to announce some of these Chinese purchases of beef, soybeans, Boeing airplanes. The Boeing airplanes were actually negotiated several years ago, but have not been authorized by the Chinese government until such a summit like we're going to have over the next few days. But for the president, he really wants those headlines as he goes into the midterm elections and to really shore up his domestic standing in the polls. On the Chinese side, they obviously want to flatter President Trump, but they don't want to go overboard because they want to convey to their constituents a position of strength. And obviously, they have a lot of cards. They're going to want to make sure that some of the export controls on advanced chips are relaxed. That's why I think Jensen Huang of NVIDIA is there to hopefully announce relaxation or at least the sale of some of these advanced chips to China. China, of course, is actually catching up. Within a few years, they won't need American advanced chips because they are moving so rapidly with respect to artificial intelligence. The other thing that President Trump will want to emphasize is getting China to pressure Iran to open up the Strait of Hormuz. China, of course, gets only about 6% of their energy supply from the Gulf, whether from the Gulf states, which are now cut off because of the closure of the strait by Iran, or even the blockade by the United States of Iranian oil. But nonetheless, the other countries in the region are feeling the pinch of the lack of oil, and that, of course, affects the economy of China. China has an ace card. They control the rare earths and the critical minerals that are necessary for all the cruise missiles, the Patriot missiles, fighter jets, and even Ford automobiles. And so they want an extension of this trade truce, although a lot of the tariffs that America has imposed have been struck down by the courts. So China is actually feeling that they're in a position of strength. Right. They're also going to try to pressure the United States to say they're not going to sell as many military equipment or arms to Taiwan. The United States is not going to retreat from its commitment to Taiwan, but privately, President Trump may be pressured or urged to slow down the sales of advanced weaponry to Taiwan.
Michelle, I was also fascinated to read a chart recently that showed our U.S. exports to China went from 8 to north of 25% at their peak about 10 years ago. They've since come all the way back down to 8%. I believe it's in the Wall Street Journal. In other words, there has been a big sea change. Even just in the past few years, we've seen lots of other products not rerouted, but coming from places like Vietnam instead of China. And I just wonder, underpinning all of this, how much that changes the dynamic.
Yeah, you're talking about trans-chip shipments, Kelly. I think what's important to know about this summit in particular is that it reflects, I think, the first time that there's a major change in attitude by the U.S. towards dealing with China and trade. For nearly 20 years, the U.S. leadership, economists all over the world, even Chinese economists, told the Chinese Communist Party, you need to stop intervening in the government, in the economy so much. You need to stop state subsidies. You need to stop relying so heavily on investment to the point that your consumers, despite being such a rich country, are some of the poorest in the world. And why doesn't anybody like that? Because they produce so many things that they flood markets all over the world, and they can't sell to their own consumers because they're poor. So what ends up happening? We end up deindustrializing in the United States. Now, with Trump putting on all these tariffs, taking a very strong attitude, what have the Chinese done? They've now started to flood Europe with their exports. And now we're watching Germany deindustrialize before our eyes as well. So instead of trying to convince the Chinese Communist Party to change its ways, what this administration has decided to do is try to manage the trade relationship. We keep hearing whispers, Jameson Greer, U.S. trade representative, talking about perhaps a board of trade, something that acknowledges that getting the Chinese to follow the rules of the WTO is never going to work. And the Europeans, slowly but surely, are coming on board to this idea as well, because they are now suffering from this influx. That's the core of what this meeting is about.